So welcome to Constructive Rest Club in February the 13th. So we've been working, so I teach these online classes. I teach the Alexander Technique online on a Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening, and I teach an Alexander Technique class designed especially for yoga teachers which is very yoga-y, as you might imagine, on a Thursday morning. And lately in our classes, we've been talking about the relationship between the head and the neck. And I thought we'd have a little bit of that awareness to this evening. So if you want to lie down on the floor in your semi-supine position, you want to have some padding under you, especially if you're on wood floors or something like that. You absolutely want padding then. But even on a carpeted floor, you might want to have a blanket under you, or padded like a yoga mat or something like that. You want to feel comfortable, but we want the firm surface because it's easier. It's a whole nother workshop actually describing that, but anyway, we want the firm surface. You also want to have a little bit of something under your head, some soft backed books, or a block of some kind. Maybe if that's too hard for you, then a cushion, but make it a firm cushion. So we don't want, because you again want something supportive under the head. And also that support that's under your head doesn't want to be pressing towards the shoulders or the neck. It wants to be just under the head. So the edge of your book wants to be right just to the base of your skull. Your knees are bent and your feet are on the floor. And when you first start playing around with this work, you sometimes find it difficult. We sometimes find it difficult to keep the knees up and parallel, and they feel like maybe they want to fall outwards or inwards. And I like to say to people, it's a juggle, it's a bit of a game. Can I use as little tension as possible around the tops of the thighs, around the legs, but keep the legs in this semi-supine, this parallel position? If you feel that you're struggling to release and relax through the pelvis because of the position of your legs, then you're more than welcome to move your feet quite far away from each other and let your knees fall inwards, as long as that's comfortable on your knees. And at any time during this next half an hour, you're welcome to fidget, move, even get up and walk around, do whatever you feel you need to for your own body's comfort. Because I primarily am encouraging, teaching you and the people I teach how to have a relationship with their body where they and their body are in charge. You know best. And often, actually, even when we get to adulthood, there's a disconnect from ourselves to our body, and we can't hear it. Sometimes I can't hear that my body doesn't want to eat another piece of cake, and I will go ahead and eat another piece of cake. And then a little while later, I will realize that my body may have sent that signal and I missed it. And now I really wish I hadn't eaten that cake because my tummy hurts. This is a very simplistic example, but actually this is really something that we are mastering with this work. The more you connect to yourself, the more you find that inner voice that your body has, and it will communicate to you. So, long way of saying, when you're here with me and lying in semi-supine, listen and allow your body to be the most instructive part of this session, more than my voice. So as I mentioned, in my classes at the moment, we've been looking at the relationship between the head and neck, and the head, neck and back. In the world of Alexander Technique, FM Alexander called it the primary control. There's a lot of peculiar jargon in the Alexander Technique world, which I do my best to keep away from, because it's not necessary often. Some of it makes a lot of sense, some of it makes no sense. So we're thinking about the relationship between your head and your neck and your back. And when we sort of pick that apart, what we're talking about here is there's a spine, and your spine goes all the way up inside your head. It gets right up in there. And what we want is for the big musculature around the head, neck and shoulders, the neck and shoulders especially, to release its grip on the head, so that your head isn't being pulled down and into your spine, and your spine isn't being pushed up and into your head. We're trying to create a bit of ease around the top of the spine, around what you might think of, or we call sometimes the nodding joint. And if we can create a little bit of ease around that top nodding joint, then what we can find is that the back muscles will be inclined to lengthen, and the balance of the head is much more comfortable. The body starts to find a bit of ease. So lying in semi-supine as you are, the head is at the moment, your head is supported by the books that you're lying on. If you can, I'd like you to just be aware of that and say, oh yeah, there they are. Books, my head resting on them. The books are touching the back of your head. And as I mentioned earlier, they shouldn't be touching anything else. Books are just touching the back of your head. Say to yourself, say to your neck, that it can let go of any gripping or tightening. It doesn't need to support your head right now because the books are supporting your head. Ask for a softness from under your chin all the way down through to the collarbones. Ask the muscles that travel sort of around your ears and all the way down the sides of your neck to the tops of your shoulders to let go a bit, and easing through the neck. Bring your awareness to your head again, resting heavy. It is heavy. Resting heavily on the books. Take your mind to the very base of your skull at the back of your head and ask for a widening from your left ear across to your right ear, a sort of broadening smile through the base of your skull, smiling in the back of your head. As you're asking for that lovely widening, that broadening, you can imagine that the very top of your spine, right up in your head, is falling to the back of your head. So we're broadening through the base of the skull and asking the very top of the spine to drop back to the back of your head. It's not really a feeling, probably, you might get a sense of ease. There might be a sense of undoing. It's unlikely that you'll get a feeling that the spine does drop through to the back of the head, because so much of this work, we're putting in place some ideas, some instructions, some thoughts, and we're using a sort of artistic license with anatomy and all sorts of things, actually, I do anyway, to bring about a change within you. So many things aren't to be taken literally. And the next is definitely one of them. I'd like you to take your awareness to halfway down the back of your neck. See if you can just imagine that space, that place, somewhere halfway down the back of the neck. In one of the classes, we were trying to figure out where we were really talking about, and I think we were talking in sort of C3, C4, something like that. But it didn't really matter because it was halfway down the back of your neck, wherever that is. I'd like you to ask for something to release there. You could imagine a sort of an unlocking, if you wanted, of a door or a lock. You could imagine that the whole column of your neck is falling back into that space behind you, into the floor. Or you could just know that by asking for the musculature to be easy and a little bit softer through the sides and the back of the neck, that it will listen to your brain that's giving that instruction and it will relax a bit. And that instruction that you're giving, that asking, that wanting, that wishing, starts sort of as a very basic thing and becomes more refined. It also becomes quicker. So if this is not your first constructive rest, lying on the floor, doing all of this, you'll find that thinking in your body becomes easier and easier, and it then responds. So we're halfway down the back of your neck, and you're asking for something to let go, so that the whole column of the neck can sort of relax back to the floor behind you. And then at the same time as having some of your brain over there, at the back of you, you're going to take your awareness through to your chest, to your breastbone, to under your collarbones. Be aware of that area, the musculature, the big pectoral muscles across the upper chest, asking for a softness and easiness through the upper chest. Thinking of a lightness under that breastbone, a lightness under your collarbones, a sort of undoing, a freedom. And without doing anything, no muscular activity required, just know that there's space between this upper chest area and the middle of the back of your neck. There's depth. You have depth between those two spaces. Just have that as an idea. And then we'll move on a little. We'll head on down to your pelvis, that amazing collection of bones that houses all of the most magnificent equipment. That heavy pelvis resting on the floor. And maybe as you connect into that area, you might feel that, oh, one of my hips is a bit higher than the other, or one hip's a bit tighter than the other. We're just going to accept that right now. Nobody needs to be pushing or shoving or doing anything peculiar. Just notice and say, there it is, that's the weight. Maybe unevenly distributed, but that's my pelvis resting on the ground. If you were to take your mind to the top of your thigh, say your right thigh, the top of the thigh being closest to your hip, and ask for something to release around there, the inner thigh, front, the outer thigh, the back of the top of your right thigh, right up by your bum bone, asking for a sort of an ease, freedom. Then you might find that there's a weight shift again through the pelvis. Maybe you'll think, oh, actually, as I let go on that hip, there's something that changes. Maybe the belly can soften a bit. Maybe that gives up its holding, its letting go. Asking your tummy to soften, your back to widen will help to support freeing off the hips. And going over to the left hip area, or in fact the very top of the thigh, right up close to the hip, the front of it, the inner thigh, the outer thigh. Noticing if you're hanging on around the sit bone, your bum bone, asking for something to release there. So that the heads of both your thigh bones can drop back into your hip sockets. And as the heads of your thigh bones drop back into the hip sockets, you can ask them, imagine, wish that they move away from each other, encouraging a widening through the pelvis. Increasing that tone through the pelvic floor. Finding appropriate tone through the belly, the lower abdominal area. And then noticing now your feet resting on the floor, the left foot, the right foot. As I've said, I'm sure before, they always get a bit of a tough time, I think, feet in the winter. They get put into multiple layers of socks and shoved into various boots and wellies and things that aren't perhaps best for them. So take this opportunity to have a little, perhaps a wiggle of the toes, and know in your mind where the outside of your foot is, the outside of the left foot up to the little toe, the outside of the right foot up to the little toe. Know in your mind where the big toes are and the base of the big toes. Thinking broad thoughts across the front of your feet. Letting the feet have their space. Feeling the floor underneath your feet. Noticing how that is, that support that's there for you. And as you notice and feel the support that's under your feet, have a thought to your springy kneecaps. And if you're connected to them in some way mentally, you can say, well, are they springy? Am I gripping my kneecaps? Am I pulling my kneecaps onto the tops of my knees? Is this another area where we need to let go to allow the kneecaps to rest on top of the knees, like we allow the skull to rest on top of the spine? Can we allow the leg muscles to give up a bit of holding? How are your legs doing? Do they need to have a rest? Do the knees need to rest on each other? Are they still comfortable? Are your feet in the right place? You're welcome to shuffle and move and relocate any of your limbs to make things comfortable. And then we're going to go back up to the very top of your spine again. Think of it being inside your head, somewhere up level with your ears. One of my teachers used to say to me, imagine you've got a pencil going from your left ear through to your right ear. That's where your nodding joint is. And sometimes I think that's quite an unpleasant thought. But actually it was quite helpful. Oh, sorry, yep, got a thumbs down. Soften your tongue and let it rest in your mouth. See if you can do a little bit less in your jaw joint, where your lower jaw bone meets your upper jaw bone. Can there be a sense of freedom in the jaw? Soften your tongue again. Let it rest in the mouth, wherever it rests. Go back to the location of that nodding joint, whatever imagery you'd like to use. And without movement, just imagine that your head is nodding in a sort of forwards yes direction. And that as you're imagining your head nodding forwards, your back of neck is lengthening. And that base of the back of the skull is widening. Leave the weight of your head on your books. Don't pull it away. Don't lift it in any way. Leave the weight of the head on the books and find that midway down through the back of your neck, that midpoint which could be let go of. Know where that midpoint is, somewhere down back of your neck, wherever it is your brain goes to. And imagine that your lower jawbone releases forwards away from it, like a softening, a deepening. And then let go of all the concentration in your face. Lighten up around the eyes. Think happy thoughts around the cheekbones. And still keep the tongue softly resting in your mouth. Check in with your rib cage, especially through the side of your body, from the armpits down through to the hips. Check in with the ribs across the back of you. Allow your lower back ribs to drop back and widen. Know where the floor is, that lovely, supportive floor. And ask again for some lightening up under the breastbone. A light freedom under the collarbones. And a springiness from your kneecaps. Know where the back of you is resting on the floor. And know where some of the front of you is. Your chin, your breastbone, your kneecaps. Releasing forwards and up. Finally, undo your armpits. Let go of all the tension that we like to gather under there. Perhaps imagine that there's an enormous space under your armpits, but don't move your arms. They don't need to go anywhere else. I mean, unless you want to, if they're uncomfortable, then do. Easy under the armpits, but restful through the arm bones. Even down through to your fingers, your wrists, the elbows. Notice now, excuse me, notice now how you feel. Physically, how do you feel? What word might describe yourself? Spacious, relaxed, quiet and still. Other words, what are they? And then if you can, notice how you're feeling emotionally. Calm, cheerful, grateful. How are you feeling on all levels? I'm feeling very peaceful on all levels. So we're coming up to past, which means you've been lying down for 25 minutes. And that's probably long enough for most. If you do want to stay there longer, then I'm fine with that. That's totally up to you. Or in fact, if you've nodded off, that's fine by me. Probably you needed a zizz. When you do get up, roll on your side. Think about your neck. Perhaps find that midpoint halfway up the back of your neck and let that release as you roll on your side and come on up to sitting. We've got a